Corporate Finance Excel Practice Problem. In this presentation, we're going to work a practice problem related to making an income statement. Time to take a stance with corporate finance. Here we are in Excel. We have our information on the left-hand side. We're going to enter that into the blue area into our worksheet on the right-hand side. So we got two tabs down below. We're going to be working two types of problems. Once again, we're going to be constructing income statements. And we want to get good at just formatting the income statement, getting used to the ordering of the income statement, working on Excel as we work through the practice of putting together an income statement. So we got our information on the left. It's basically going to be a scrambled list of accounts that we're going to be putting on the right as we construct this. Remember, the income statement is a timing statement. It represents how the company is doing over time. So we're going to be picking this up. We want to memorize the order of this thing again. So we're going to say, all right, this income statement thing starts with revenue. You could call it income. If they sell things, it's often going to be called sales. If it's a service company, it might be called service income or fees income or something like that. We're going to be picking up the revenue. I'm going to be using the formulas. Therefore, I'm going to say equals, and I'm going to scroll over to the revenue account. We're going to use the formulas as much as possible, practicing Excel as we go. We're going to go over here and say equals, and we'll pick up the revenue, the $500,000. You may want to highlight these. We got a few of these, so if this was in a practice problem and you want to do it as fast as possible, you might want to say, all right, I'm going to yellow that one up. I'm going to right-click on it and highlight it yellow, and that means that it's been done. That's what the yellow means. So then we have the cost of goods sold, which represents our major expense, which is going to be up top because it's so important if we sell inventory. If we don't sell inventory, we won't have cost of goods sold like if we were a law firm. But if we do sell inventory, cost of goods sold, very important. Therefore, we're going to make it our next big number. Cost of goods sold and expense account related to us consuming the inventory as we use it to generate revenue. And this is going to be equal to then the $160,000. $160,000. Let's go ahead and yellow off this cost of goods sold, selecting it, right-clicking on it, yellowing it off. Yellow it off. And then we have the gross profit is a subcategory. So gross profit, I'm just going to type in there. This is a stop along the way. I'll just call it a stop along the way to get to net income. We're going to say, hey, I want to make a pit stop here because this is an important number. Net income is basically just going to be revenue minus expenses, the bottom line, the earnings after taxes. But we want to make a few important pit stops along the way if we're talking about a multi-step income statement as we are here. One of those being gross profit, showing the relationship between revenue, our goal to generate revenue, and the major function that we use to generate that revenue, the consumption of the inventory reflected as cost of goods sold. So this is going to be equal to, I'm going to use the up arrows now, up, to go to the 500,000 minus, going up arrow this time, up, not the down, because we're not up here now, right? When I hit the minus sign, we're down on this cell down below. So E2 minus E3, or 500,000 by minus 160,000 gives us the 340,000. I would then like to put an underline under this 160,000 formatting process. We're going to go over to the home tab. We're going to go to the font. We're going to go to the underline, and then we're going to press that button with the underline, and that makes an underline happen. And then we're going to go to the next items that are going to be the other expenses that aren't as important as cost of goods sold that are going to go under that stop. That's going to be selling and admin. So I'm going to say equals, pick up the selling and admin. Full name of that would be administrative expenses, but then it gets kind of long. So you start abbreviating things like admin. You might just put expense, EXP, or something like that. S&A will often sometimes even be an abbreviation for selling and admin. You got to get used to those abbreviations because the better people get, they like using abbreviations, and then it becomes like a code thing, an insider type of thing that you got to know the lingo of these abbreviations just like any other lingo type of deal. So then you got to start learning those things. But in any case, selling and admin. So we're going to say this is going to be equal to the 130,000. There we have the 130. Let's go ahead and yellow this off. I'm going to select it, right-click on it, and yellow it off. Then we're going to pick up the depreciation expense. Depreciation expense related to, the property, plants, and equipment. We'll talk more about that later, but allocating the cost of the depreciation for the property and equipment. The long-lived or depreciable assets, and that's going to be equal to the 73,000. And then we'll yellow that off, selecting these items and yellowing it off by right-clicking and selecting the yellow item. That's going to give us our operating profit. So you can just type in there the operating profit. I'm going to paste it in there so you don't have to watch me type it and possibly misspell something. and they get angry at me for misspelling or something like, not that you would get angry, but anyways, we're going to then subtract this out. We're going to take the gross profit minus the selling and admin minus the depreciation. Couple ways we can calculate this in Excel. We could say equals, I'm going to scroll up now, up arrow, up, 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 gross profit minus, up arrow twice, up, up, the 130 minus the depreciation, up arrow once. So E4 minus E5 minus E6. That's one way we could do it. Other way we could do it is to say equals, taking the gross profit once again, minus, and then embedding the sum function into our formula, SUM, control or shift 9. You want to get really good at the sum function, so anytime you can embed it somewhere and use it, then I would do so. We then need to close up the brackets, so I'm going to say shift 0. Now you could do this all intuitively by just pointing and clicking. And then you want to basically read these, get used to the sum function, be able to understand that it means the sum of that range, E5 to E6, meaning this what's in that box, E5 to E6. Enter, so that's going to be the same kind of calculation we can have there. Then we're going to say the interest expense. We're going to put that on below here. Notice we're not down to the bottom line number to basically net income or income after taxes yet. We want the operating profit. Doesn't include, we're going to pull out the interest income in this case because the interest income is not part of kind of normal operations. It has to do with financing. We wouldn't have interest expense. We wouldn't have an interest expense if it were not for the fact that we have some kind of financing out there that we took. We had to get a loan of some kind in order to get the interest expense. So we want to break it out as not kind of our normal operations. It's only there because we needed basically the loan. Before we do that, let's go ahead and put an underline here. I didn't put an underline here. So I'm going to go to the Home tab. I'm going to click on that one, go to Home tab, Font, and then underline once again. Then we've got the operating profit. Then let's pick up the interest expense. This is going to be equal to the $45,000. There's the interest expense. And so there we have that. Notice, once again, this is another stop along the way. This item here is a stop along the way because it's not, we have another subtotal basically that's happening. It's the income statement in and of itself. You can think of as a single step income statement, which would be simply revenue minus all the expenses. And now we're breaking out these stops in a multiple step income statement along the way, which is typically the one that we'll be used to seeing most of the time for finance because we want that added data to work, calculations on. So then I'm going to go ahead and yellow this off. Once again, right clicking on it, we're going to yellow that off. That's going to give us the earnings before taxes. Earnings before taxes. I'm going to copy and paste this and I still spelled it wrong there. So earnings before taxes. And then we're going to subtract this out. This will be equal to up twice the last pit stop we made along the way, the operating profit minus up once the interest expense. So that's going to be the 92,000, the E7 minus the E8 at the 92,000. I'm going to put an underline at this 45,000 by going to the Home tab, Font group. We're going to make an underline there. Then we're going to be pulling the taxes then. Taxes is going to be the next item. Taxes is always at the bottom because we need to change taxes every time we change the earnings before taxes. That's going to have an effect on the tax rate due to the fact that the tax is going to be calculated based on the earnings. So this is going to be equal to the 47,000. And then finally, we're going to get basically to the net income, which you can also name as basically the earnings after taxes or net income after taxes. So I'm going to put our cursor on the 47,000. Home tab, Font group, we'll underline that one. We'll do our subtraction problem then. This is going to be equal to up twice, the 92,000 minus the up once, or the 47,000. There's our 45,000. Once again, if you double click on that cell, you got E9 minus E10, giving us that 45,000. If we want to double underline on that 45,000, and I do want to double underline, then we can go to the Home tab, the Font group. We're going to go to the underline, but this time drop down, the little drop down instead of the button. And we're going to get to that double underline. So remember, you can get to that same 45,000 in a single step by simply saying equals revenue minus the cost of goods sold minus the selling and admin minus the depreciation minus the interest minus the taxes, and excluding all the subtotals. And that'll give you to that same 45,000. So all those subtotals are simply stops along the way So to give more information, more subtotals along the way. If I want to see that 45,000, where that came from, which cells are not the subtotals, we can use these tools up here. I would recommend getting used to these tools because as your worksheets get more complex, this can really help you to analyze an Excel worksheet, whether it be yours or someone else's. So those can be found on the data tab here, and we're looking for, actually it's on the formulas tab, sorry about that. It's in the formulas tab. So we're in the formula auditing, and we're looking at these three tools, which I'm going to put in my quick toolbar up top. The way you do that is you right click and then you put it into your customize in your custom ribbon, which I already have mine added there. So if you do that, then you can add them up top. So then using that tool, notice if I want to say, okay, where does that come from? I could double click on it and I can see everything, but that can be a little bit complex. And if they're not right next to each other, that doesn't work a whole lot or as well. You can use this thing then, and then it basically points to it no matter how far apart these cells will be. So then you can categorize, okay, where did that 45 come from? What's included in that calculation and what are not? The subtotals are not included in that calculation. These subtotals are just simply stops along the way. Then to remove that, you can go to this removal item here. Okay, let's do the same thing now. You want to practice doing this faster and faster now. So this is going to be a problem that's going to have the same format but just different numbers. And we're just going to do this a little bit more quickly now. So I'm going to do this faster. We're going to say, all right, the income statement. It's going to start with revenue or sales equals revenue or sales. Then we're going to be picking up the amount equals the amount, 2,050,000 in this case. I'm going to highlight that, selecting it, right click, make it yellow it off. Next is the cost of goods sold. The cost of the inventory that we sell. This is a very important expense. Main expense is the cost of the main thing that we sell. If we sell inventory, that being the inventory. This is going to be equal to the 506,000. Let's yellow it off. Let's yellow it off. So we'll right click and yellow that off. Then we've got the subcategory, the stop along the way, that being gross profit. Gross profit calculated as revenue minus expenses. Don't get gross profit mixed up with net income, bottom line number of the income statement. Net income, gross profit, simply represents revenue minus expenses. It's one of those pit stops along the way to get to bottom line number of the net income. This will be equal then up to the 2,050,000 minus up 1, the 506, or E2 minus E3. That's going to be the 1,544,000. Then I'm going to put an underline on the 506 because I want to make it look nice and pretty. So we're going to go then to the Home tab, Font Group, select the drop down for the underline to make it back to the single underline because I don't want two lines under it, but just one here because the two lines, we save that for the bottom line number. And then we're going to pick up the selling and admin. So these are going to be other operating expenses, selling and admin. This is going to be equal to the 296,000. Then I'm going to yellow that off, selecting it, right clicking on it, hitting the yellow thing to make it yellow. And then we're going to go to the depreciation expense equals the depreciation expense, representing the cost of the property, plants, and equipment that we're allocating to the proper period, which we'll talk more about in future presentations. And that's going to be the 190,000. So we're going to yellow that off, selecting it, right clicking, yellow thingy dingy, yellowing it off, which is the yellow paint brush box if thingy dingy is not specific enough a term. So then we're going to go and let's put an underline under this. We're going to go to the Home tab, Font Group, and we'll put an underline under that one. And then we're going to have the operating profit. Operating profit, this is the profit basically from, the operations, the main kind of profit without like more kind of unusual things happening after that or things that aren't part of the essential parts of the operation, which can be calculated a few different ways. Equals up to the last pit stop we were at, which was the gross profit minus up selling and admin expense minus up once the depreciation. You can also calculate it using the sum function, which I would practice doing whenever possible, equals, and we're going to pick up that gross profit minus and then embed the sum function, SUM, shift 9, up arrow once, and then holding down shift up again, or you can use just the mouse and, highlight those two, and then close up the brackets, which is shift 0, enter. Another way you can calculate that same number. Then we're going to be picking up the interest expense. Interest expense is going to be equal to the 126,000. Then I'm going to yellow that off because we found a home for it by right clicking on it and yellowing it off with the yellow paint box. Then we're going to put another underline on the 126. So we'll select that cell. We're going to go to the Home tab, Font Group, underline that cell. Then we're going to have the earnings before taxes. Earnings before taxes, which I've copy and paste here. You can type it in. I still misspelled it. And then we're going to say this will be equal to the last pit stop, the operating profit, minus the new thing we added, the expense here. So minus and then up once, or E7 minus E8. That's going to be the 936,000. Then we'll take the taxes, is going to be the final thing. It's always the last thing that we do, the taxes, because the taxes will change based on the net income. When the net income changes, the tax changes. That's going to be equal to the 165,000. We'll go ahead and yellow off the taxes, even though it's the last one. It's probably not necessary at this point, but we like to be, to complete things here. So we're going to have the 165,000. Let's underline it. Home tab up top, Font Group. We're going to hit the underline button. That's going to give us to the basically bottom line number here. That is the bottom line number that we're going to have, which you could call net income or simply earnings after the taxes, which is going to be equal to the earnings before the taxes up to that 932,000 minus the taxes up once, the 165,000, giving us the 767,000. That's the bottom line. We like to save that double underline for the bottom line number. Now we're at that bottom line number. Let's give it the double underline. We're going to go to the Home tab. We're going to go to the Font Group. We're going to select the drop down. We're going to double underline it. And there we have it.